Alright, hello and welcome everybody back to the video. I'm your SimCA5, means I'm your flight instructor for any sim purposes. If you have questions on Microsoft, P3D, or DCS, leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to answer the best I can. And saying that I'm also a real pilot, I fly the CRJ now in real life, so if you have questions on that, leave a comment on the CRJ, or becoming a pilot in general. You can leave a question on that. I used to be an instructor as well, so I'll try to help as best I can. Today we'll be looking at the landing technique, the updated landing technique for the CRJ 900, and I'll be giving you my rural technique that I use that works quite well actually in the sim now. It didn't work before at all, but now if you do the rural, if you apply the rural technique, it does work quite well. So before we get into it, I want to show you my yoke settings and my rudder pedal settings. I'm using the Boeing Thrustmaster TCA yoke, and I'm using the Wing Skywalker pedals, rudder pedals that they have. So I'll show you my settings for that. It's going to be what I think the real airplane flies like in the sim is how I have interpreted it from my experience flying it. So it's going to need a lot more movement than you're probably used to doing, but that's how the real airplane flies. So this is how I'm kind of translating into the sim as best I possibly can with these settings. They still work in progress. I have in my Discord as well, so be sure to join the Discord. And if any changes to the settings do change, I update it in my Discord under resources. So let's go take a look. Under resources. So let's go take a look. Controls. This is my TCA yoke. This is the X-axis over here and the pitch axis over here. These are still work in progress, so they're not all done yet, but this is kind of what I'm going with for right now. This is what feels the most realistic to me, as best as I can possibly get it in the sim with a TCA yoke. But anyways, those are my yoke settings, and my rudder pedal settings are as follows. This is my rudder here, and then the brakes over here. I'm trying to make the brakes very sensitive, as the brakes in real life are crazy sensitive, so I'm actually going to jack them up to 70%. The real brakes are steel on the CRJ 900, so the tippy toe pressure is enough that you will stop. So anyways, let's get to the rest of the video. Alright, so I'll be doing just a landing, so I'm going to set my flaps to 45, and I'm going to use FS flight control to port me back on final. And before we do that, I'm going to quickly give you a technique that I'm going to use. So let me go over here very quickly on the runway here. If you're looking at it from this point of view, these markers that I'm basically sitting on almost, those big thick bars right there, those are the 1,000-foot markers. And those 1,000-foot markers, that is going to be our aiming point. So in a landing, we have two things. We have an aiming point and we have a touchdown point. So when we're coming down to land, before 50 feet, I'm staring at my aiming point. Now your aiming point can change depending on how short your runway is. If you're landing, let's say, a Cessna 172 and you're landing in 2,000 feet, my aiming point sometimes may be in the grass. So in the Cessna, I can just flare it off and then touch the numbers, right? But in these long runways for airline service, most likely, usually, your aiming point is going to be the 1,000-footers or maybe slightly just behind. So this means we're going to be staring at this aiming point until 50 feet. And at 50 feet, let me go down a little bit lower, my sight picture, I'm going to change from staring at these aiming points to looking all the way down to the end of the runway. And when I look down to the end of the runway and I'm getting closer to the runway, I'm using my peripheral vision to judge my flare. So that's what we're going to be doing. I'll also mention, when you're staring at the aiming point, you're driving the airplane to the aiming point, which means I'm keeping my nose down pointed at the aiming point until I start my flare. In theory, if I'm looking at the aiming point and I'm flying to the aiming point, if I didn't flare, I would smash into the aiming point. That's kind of the goal. Obviously, we're not going to do that. We're going to flare the airplane and reduce our rate of descent. So when we come over our aiming point, we touch down maybe a couple hundred feet, maybe a couple, or maybe 500 feet in the RJ at least, past our aiming point, if that makes sense. So I'll show you what it looks like in the air, and any crosswind corrections inputs as well. So I'll briefly mention crosswind inputs. If let's say we had a crosswind from the right, our airplane would kind of be flying kind of like this. We'd kind of be crabbing towards the runway like this, pointed to the right to drive into that wind. And at the last, I lie like 10 feet, just before the wheels touch, we're going to add left rudder. And when you add left rudder, the airplane's going to start to roll left as well. So left rudder and a little bit of right aileron, maybe a lot of right aileron, depending on your wind, to offset that wind. Okay, so let's go on the flight deck, and we're going to go ahead and spawn on final. Alright guys, we just spawned in on final, runway 24 left. I'm going to quickly pause it here. Little disclaimer, we're going to be getting the don't sink warning a million times because we spawned on final, and whenever you spawn on final with the flight control panel I use, it just glitches out, so you'll get that. Anyways, we have a 20 knot wind from the right, a 26 knot wind from the right, 90 degrees, and so we're going to be pointing, once we get on center line, we'll be pointing more that way, but tracking to the center line. So in these conditions, your goal is touchdown zone on the landing and center line control. You don't obviously want to slam it. However, we're not too concerned as much with the greasing ability. We just want to get in the touchdown zone, get on the center line, maybe 320 feet per minute or less, something like that, to give a number on it. But just know that we're not really concerned with the whole greasing. We just want a landing in the touchdown zone, safe on the center line. If it's a bit firm, that's fine. The longer you grease it, or try to grease it, anyways, the more that you're going to be getting thrown off the center line. So let's get back on track here as we've just spawned in, and you can see that on the landing, we're going to be using left rudder and right aileron input. And that's going to be done at the last 10 feet or so. In saying that, again, if we do that and hold it off too long in the flare, we will get carried off after we've decrabbed. So basically it's going to be 10 feet, decrab, touchdown is basically how it's supposed to go. And in the sim, it doesn't look like it's crabbed as much as it really is. Like, we're pointing to the other runway, but we look like we're almost center line. So add more rudder in the sim than you'd actually think you'd need to add. I've been noticing the sight picture doesn't look as correct as it should. Maybe the dimensions or something, I'm not sure, but... Okay, continue that centerline control as soon as the nose gear touches. Remember, in the sim, I'm not even used to it. In the sim, your nose gear, as soon as it touches, your rudder becomes your nose wheel steering, and it gets very squirrely. So just be conscious of that. I'm still trying to get used to that myself, because obviously in real life, the rudder's the rudder and the nose wheel steering is the tiller. So as soon as that nose gear touches the ground, just be very cognizant of that now it is your nose wheel steering, and the nose gear is physically turning you, and it will turn quite quickly. So anyways, let's go show you a replay of that landing. As you saw, it wasn't the smoothest landing in the world. Definitely wasn't the hardest landing in the world. And we got it in the touchdown zone. Well, that's not good. There we go. My replay's doing all sorts of weird stuff. Touchdown zone, centerline control. That's what we want. So I'll show you from this view first, and then I'll show you down the center line. I added my rudder in a little early. Should have waited a little bit longer. Alright, not bad. Actually, the rudder actually looked quite good. Let me go ahead and go back a little bit, and I'll put you right down the pipe. Now, when that nose gear touches the ground, notice how much my rudder input is perfect here. And as soon as that nose gear touches the ground, I don't know if I can zoom out enough, it becomes like a squirrel. There it is. It just kind of squirrely mess. That's kind of just a simism. You kind of have to just deal with it, unfortunately. But yeah, I'll show you maybe a wing view if you guys want to see that. And I'll talk about this landing as well. I'll go through it and pause with you all the different steps that I did. And this is runway 24 left into Toronto Pearson. It's just always constant micro adjustments to these wind conditions here. Looks rougher in the wing than it does in the flight deck or the in the replay. Either way, that's that. Pretty normal landing, to be honest with you. If you go watch any CRJ landing, it's in these crosswind conditions. It's a pretty normal one. But anyways, let me go ahead and pause it about here, and we'll go to the flight deck. So we're just about to hit 50 feet shortly, and right now I'm focused here because I'm at 80 feet still. But as soon as I get the 50 feet call, I'm going to be looking all the way down the runway. So about here we're 50 feet. And instead of looking here, we're going to look all the way down to the end. Now watch the end of the runway as this, all I'm going to do now is I just want you guys to watch the end of the runway during this replay here. That's all, and we'll focus on the rest of it after. Just watch the end of the runway. Right near the end, right at the end. Did you see that? Did you see how watching the end of the runway, your peripheral vision, the runway's nicely slowly coming up to you, and you have all that time to flare it off and do whatever you want to do. So that's why you watch the end of the runway. Now, so we're watching the end. 30 feet, start reducing the thrust. 20 feet, we're going to start the flare. 10 feet, we're going to add the rudder, continue flaring, idle thrust, and the airplane touches down quite nicely. So again, it's not this technique I use in real life, and it works great. It's not going to guarantee you anything, but it's going to set you up for a high success rate on a safe touchdown in the touchdown zone on the center line. And if you utilize it correctly, you can grease with it or do whatever you want in the sim. But in real life, that we're more concerned with center line and touchdown zone, and obviously a safe touchdown. Nothing, you're not going to be breaking backs or doing anything crazy, but we want to get in the touchdown zone on the center line is our main objective there, especially with these wind conditions. So I'll show you one more replay from outside, and we'll end it with that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If it's helped, please leave a comment down below that it helped as well. And many more videos to come in streams as well. But this airplane is definitely challenging to land in real life, and it's a lot more challenging in the sim, I can tell you that. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Please join the Discord down below, and if you want to buy Say Intentions as well, I have a Say Intentions affiliate link down below. You can go and buy with that. It does help the channel immensely, so thank you for anyone who has used it. And yeah, subscribe, like for more, and comment as well. I'll be reading those comments. So we'll see you guys in the next video. Good day.